Alright, wrap up time for this week's Much Abrew About Nothing featuring Thing Ascension in Modern. So, I have to say, I was incredibly impressed with this deck. It was very consistent at doing something really good on turn 3. We almost always, thanks to the combination of all of our looting effects, Thing in the Ice and Pyromancer's Ascension, had one of our big hitting spells, Thing in the Ice or Pyromancer's Ascension, on turn 2. And then on turn 3, we have enough spells that we very consistently either turn on our Pyromancer's Ascension, which likely sets us up for the turn 4 win, or flips our Thing in the Ice, bounces all of our opponent's stuff, and gets in a bunch of damage, which can let us win without Pyromancer's Ascension just by throwing lightning bolts and stuff at our opponent's face. Plus, we have a 7-8 left over on the battlefield, which is a lot to deal with on turn 3 in a game of Modern. So I was really impressed with the consistency. The deck feels partway like the old Blue-Red Storm decks, which featured Pyromancer's Ascension, except it doesn't have as much of the big turn kill potential. Like, there are still turns, if you untap with an active Pyromancer's Ascension and a bunch of Manamorphoses, you make a lot of mana and potentially win on the spot, but we're not really playing rituals, we're not trying to storm count a ton in Grape Shot or anything. We are a pretty value-y version of a Storm deck that's going to win over 2 or 3 turns. One of the things I really like about the deck is Thing in the Ice essentially gives the deck an additional Pyromancer's Ascension. They don't play the same, but one of the problems with the Storm deck is if you didn't have the Pyromancer's Ascension, what's your backup plan? You don't really have a good backup plan, or your backup plan is Past in Flames, which is kind of expensive and slow and requires all the rituals. The other thing that Thing in the Ice does for this deck, which is really sweet, and one of the reasons I really like this deck is we're not 100% reliant on the graveyard. So one of the things that was absolutely devastating for a Storm deck would be graveyard removal, because they really needed Pyromancer's Ascension or Past in Flames to be able to cast enough spells to get the win. And while we still want to do that, and a lot of our best draws involve Pyromancer's Ascension, Thing in the Ice gives us a way to win the game without using our graveyard at all, combined with all the Lightning Bolts effects, which is something else that is missing from a Storm deck, so we can kind of, when things go wrong or our opponent sideboards in hate cards, we can kind of play a fair game of Magic. So I was just very impressed with this deck. I thought it was very good. It was more consistent than I thought. I think it's fast enough to race some combo decks, especially when you consider we have 8 main deck removal spells in Bolt and Helix, so we have a chance to kill an Inkmoth Nexus against Infect or a Blighted Agent or a Goblin Guide or something out of the decks that might be able to race us, and I think we will typically be faster than Ad Nauseam and Scapeshift type combo decks, even though we did lose to Scapeshift in our match, but I think we got a little bit, like, weird draws and our opponent drew wells, but I don't think that's really a bad matchup. So overall, I was really impressed with this deck. I don't really have much that I would suggest changing. It felt like it functioned really well, and I think it's pretty well set up. I like the sideboard, being able to bring in Blood Moons. Rest in Peace is another great answer to decks like Burn and so forth. So all around, this just felt like a really solid deck. I had a ton of fun playing it, and it just felt good. Like, I could imagine taking this deck in its current form and competing in a SCG Open, in a GP, in that level of event. It seemed like a real legitimate deck in the Modern meta. It felt like a really good deck. Anyway, that's been our Much Abrew About Nothing for this week. Make sure to keep up on the instant deck tags all next week to vote for next week's deck. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the videos, and I will talk to you soon.